Is George excessive with his descriptions of fat people? Yes, absolutely. Do they feel malicious? I don't think so.
No,
I think he is lovingly speaking on the fat experience, Spicer. Welcome to A Song of Spice and Rhani, a Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire podcast for the girls, the gays, the theys, and the well-behaved straights. I am your host, Rhani.
And I am George R.R. Martin's nipple fixation, Spicer.
Okay. You have one line, friends.
It's true!
I'm doing the opening. Jesus. And every week, because this is the scripted part, and every week we will be going through 3 chapters of the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, breaking down what happens, the lore, theories, and our favorite deaths. Are you excited for the deaths, Spicer?
I'm so excited for the deaths, baby.
Great. Remember, you can choose to read along with us at home or just listen to us yap. It's completely up to you. This week, our 3 chapters were Daenerys I, Eddard I, and Jon I. Okay. So we're going to start. The first chapter was Daenerys I. This is the first chapter where you meet Daenerys Targaryen, and oof, do you feel bad for her? Let's go over a little summary of what happened. So Daenerys Targaryen and her brother Viserys are in Pentos. They're in the home of Illyrio Mopatis. He's a magister. He's a merchant. He trades and things. And for whatever reason, we're not quite sure, he has allowed Viserys and Daenerys to live with him for the last 6 months. Viserys doesn't seem to question this because he doesn't question a lot because he's the dragon, as he likes to remind us. Daenerys is a little smarter. So Daenerys questions like, okay, what does he want from us? Why is he doing this? Woo, woo, woo. But to Viserys' eyes, Illyrio is just helping him gain an army by arranging a marriage between Daenerys, who is all of 13 years old, to Khal Drogo, the head of a Dothraki horde of, I believe, 40,000 Dothraki. So he's a Khal, he's the one in charge, and the whole point of the chapter is they're going to get to meet him. She sees him for the first time, and she is scared of the man. It's not very fun.
Yeah, we love bullying a younger sister into a child bride situation. It's
Yeah. Well, we can start with that.
What a place to start.
Hey, just a quick producer's note from the future. I wanted to let everyone know that we reference SA in the scene between Viserys and Daenerys. What we are referring to specifically is Viserys basically pinching a nipple, but that's what we're talking about. I realized after that we had just said the word SA a bunch without actually talking about what had happened in the scene. Okay, back to the podcast. What a place to start.
The arranged child marriage. Oh my god!
Because Viserys, wants his throne back because he thinks he's very important because he's traumatized. Woo!
So much trauma.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, not to excuse any of the behavior from him, just to be clear, he is a monster at this point, but I think we can all, get how a monster gets to be a monster in this case. If he was spirited away when I think they said he was what was he, 6, 7, 8? He was little.
He was like a child.
He was a very young child who was now alone in the world with a baby sister and, growing up thinking that everything has been taken away from him while he's on the run and slowly deluding himself with visions of grandeur and his great return. That's probably not healthy, as we have seen in the person he's grown into.
Yeah. I have some thoughts that I'll talk about in sort of the 3rd chapter about perspective and sort of what I think is interesting with the medium that George is doing this in. But we'll get to that in a second. But I will say for this chapter, my first note is just Dany's frowny face. It's just
okay.
poor Dany. It didn't
yeah.
It is not Danny's day. It is not
No.
Danny's day. We get slightly SA'd by your brother, and then we get married off to our Mongol stand-in.
Well, we haven't been married off yet. We have met the person. The wedding isn't for a minute.
The wedding isn't for a minute. I will say, like, the thing that I do love how, like, we learn very quickly that, like, Dany is much smarter than everyone gives her credit for. Like, very quickly. Like, I love the fact, like, there's, like, the line about how, like, she could tell that, like, Illyrio was, like, almost smiling as he was, like, egging on Viserys, and it's like, girl, do you not see you are being played so hard right now? Like...
Well, no, and that's what's so fascinating about, like, that character dynamic between the two of them, because Viserys, you can tell, like, is traumatized in the sense that, like, he has to believe everything. His whole worldview is a house of cards. And if you do anything to mess with it, it's going to come crumbling down. So, like, the unhealthy way that he holds on to that, one of the lines on that note that I wrote down is when he's talking to Illyrio, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm like you said, like, everyone's going to want me to be back, and they're all, like, yearning for me, and they love me. And then, like, period. And then he goes, they do, don't they?
Yeah.
And Illyrio's like, yes, they do, as far as I know. And Viserys like, yeah, of course.
They're knitting secret banners that they hide from everyone else. And it's like, girl. My other favorite is there's a line where, like, Daenerys talks about how, like, Viserys is like, there's hired knives everywhere looking for us. And Dany's like, I've never seen them. Like, girl, what knives?
But he says they're there.
Like, girl, what knives are you talking about? We're two poor kids running around these cities. Like, like, Robert's got better things to do. Than, like,
yeah. Sorry.
No, it's just, it shows, like, both his delusion, and it makes you almost kind of feel sad for him, like, how deluded he is. And then, he, like, essays her, and,
yeah.
And you're like, never mind, all sympathy gone. And
no. And, like, to be clear, when I'm, like, talking about, like, understanding, like, how he gets there, that is an explanation. It is not an excuse. He is doing very gross, bad things. Just, yeah.
Yeah. I will also say, as I said at the beginning, wow, George has a nipple fixation. It's not, like, on a scale of, like, Puritan to Joel Schumacher. Like, it's not Batman. It's not Batman Begins.
Not the Batman nipple suit.
It's not the Batman nipple suit, but it's some noticeable. If I had a nickel for every time George talked about nipple in this chapter, I'd have 3 nickels, which isn't a lot. Yeah. But it's weird that it happened that many times. I like 3 times it happened. 3 times we talked about nipples. Like,
yeah. No, and, like, it's such an uncomfortable moment. And to be clear, like, this is going to be a theme that I think I'm going to talk about, because I defend George a lot on the internet, because I think there are a lot of bad faith critiques of him out there. But one of them, I will say, I think we see the first seeds of here is, especially when there's anything like sexual or, like, sexual misconducty, intent versus execution are not always in line. Because, like, I think intent, we know that this is bad. We know that this is, like, supposed to be an uncomfortable moment. But, like, in execution, it feels like just a tad too voyeuristic. And, like, I just tone it down a little.
Yeah, just tone it down a little bit, George. Like we get the point, and it's like, I don't, because it's not even like, it's just, it's a child. It's a 13-year-old girl talking about her nipples. I get the point, George, of what you're trying to talk about. I get you trying to talk about that, medieval Europe, and this was what would happen, and right, and isn't that? But it's like. But 3 times.
Well, here's the thing with that. Okay, and I feel like this is the spiel I'm going to give on Dany's next chapter, because I'm going to be real. Like, Dany's next chapter is, I think, probably the roughest chapter in the series for me to read. Right. And this book is the worst at this particular problem. I think he gets better because I'm assuming someone pointed out, like, hey, again, not perfect. The nipple fixation will live on. Don't you worry. But anyway, but the point I'm trying to make is that there's. Actually, I don't know the point I'm trying to make. I lost it fully.
I mean, I think I just like if I can sort of pick up where you left off, like I
Sure.
get the point that like he's trying to say something with this. It's just
Yes.
it's not to sound like Kamala. It's the context, right? It's the context of like
Yes.
this is the child we are talking about here, George, and
Yes.
like I get it. I get what you're trying to say. Just
Mhm.
did we need to be so graphic about it? Like,
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, like intent versus execution, because I, I remember the thing. Basically, this isn't supposed to be okay in any sense of in any sense of the world. Even like if this is like, I know this is fantasy, but like obviously it's based on the medieval setting. But even in the medieval setting, like something that we need to make clear, because people use this as like a weird, creepy defense all the time. Like yes, they noble people were married very young. Consummation did not happen the 9 times out of 10 when they were very young. That is something that would be put off.
You would be married in absentia and like
Yes.
and then like years. I mean, that happened with literally King Henry or Prince Arthur. He never became King Arthur.
Yes.
Like he was married in absentia from
Yes.
Catherine of Aragon, and then eventually she came over, and then they consummated it, and then he died, and then they're like, well, they never consummated it, so actually Henry can have her as a bride.
Yes.
Thus Protestantism began.
and that's how we got here. But like along with that, like
Puritans. Yeah.
But along with that, like what we're saying is that wasn't the normal thing, but every once in a while it did happen, and in the context of the time, it was a bad thing. Like I think it was Margaret Beaufort. It was Henry Tudor's mother. Henry Tudor's like the first one. His mother, I think she had him when she was like 13 or something, and that was unusual. And like and if I'm messing up the monarch, like y'all, if you're a history person, you'll know who I'm talking about. But like the point of that is like when there is like a weird necessity for an heir, the children essentially get abused because they know that isn't something they should be doing to a child, which is why you have the marriage in absentia, and then years later you would consummate. But sometimes for political reasons, the kids are basically the collateral damage because we need to get this done. Yeah. And so in the context, this with Dany, that is what that is, because there's even the line where Viserys is like, isn't she too young? And Illyriel's like, no, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Like, she's ready to have kids because she's had her period. And so Khal Drogo will be fine with it. And like that, I think is meant to be a clue that like, hey, this isn't like normal, even in this context, what they're planning to do. But then like the message of that gets lost a little bit because of the voyeuristic description, and it's a little frustrating.
Yeah, it's like the message of it gets lost because it feels like we're like reading something that like the FBI needs to raid, like, right? And it's like, and like I get the point that like it's meant to make you feel uncomfortable, but it's like I feel like there were other ways that we could have accomplished this. I think just the sheer fact that this 13-year-old girl is going to be married off to this probably like 30-something-year-old man, like that's enough. That's enough. Like, we get the point. Creepy, gross, yikes. But this was the first book. Everyone has those days. Everyone makes mistakes. Like
no. But yeah. So anyway, sorry.
But moving along. I will say the other things I sort of wrote were like Viserys be crazy. And Dany just wants to go home. And I think this is such an interesting way to set up her character, that like this person is who's sort of like the unwilling ruler. Like all they want is just to go home to this home that they like never had. And like, she's constantly throughout the entire, cause she's a child, cause she's literally 13 years old. And she's like, I want to go home. Please let me go home now. I want to put I want to blast my Hillary Duff on my Walkman, and I want to just like and feel my feelings, and I don't come into my room, mom. Like that's all she wants, right? And
Yeah.
and he's like, no, time to marry this man, child, because we need to invade a whole other country. And I just think that's just such a beautiful way to set up her character. Like, and her one is she just wants to go home the entire time, and like all these things just keep happening to her. Like,
Yeah.
like she is the unwilling ruler and like the unwilling sort of protagonist, and like that's cool.
Yeah.
I think that's like an interesting sort of dynamic. It's what. To go on a point that you always talk about, that she is actually Lightbreaker, like she is like the prince who was promised, because like it's not Jon being like, I don't want it, right? Like, no, like she literally doesn't want it, like she doesn't want it, but like power and authority keeps being like thrown at her, and and like all these things. She just wants to sit with her lemon tree. That's literally all she wants. She wants her red door. Like she doesn't want any of this, and like things just keep being thrown at her. It's like, nope, sorry, time to marry Genghis Khan over here. Like sorry.
No, I fully agree, because like that's like that really is the tragedy of her. It's like the two wolves fighting. It's like her want to go home, and then like obligation of any sort being like put on her, and her like not being able to like turn it down because it's, you know, not the right thing. And so she has to keep like putting down like her own want. And no, I love this motif of the house with the red door and the lemon tree. It's a thing that will be repeated, so keep an eye out for that. And also, fun fact for you, because we're bringing you, Spicer, into this world. The house with the red door and the lemon tree is the subject of a lot of theories, because there's some weird details in the description that don't quite make sense. Because the first thing that we hear is that this house is in Bravos. And the issue with that is,
and that's because it's Venice, right? And there's no land. It's all.
Yeah, well, not just that. There, like, yeah, there isn't very land. There isn't very land. Jesus, there isn't a lot of land. It's very rocky. It's Venice. But not only that, it's in the far north of Essos. It's the most northwestern point of Essos, where it is cold. It is rainy and foggy all year round. Lemon trees don't grow in that weather. And I know the urge will be to say like, okay, so George messed up. But when people have specifically asked George about this, like, hey, this doesn't make sense. Is the house in Bravos, or is she like misremembering something? And he has responded, I cannot respond to that question quite yet. There is a reveal attached to it. So if you've noticed something, there is something to notice. So I think that's very interesting, and like, you know, has a lot of implications about her childhood and stuff that we don't quite know what it means, but we shall hopefully see.
I will also say, sorry, this is wildly different topic. I know you warned me about this. Boy, does George like talking about fat people. Boy, George loves talking about a fat person. It's
yes.
It borders on like Joanne levels of like talking about fat people. Like
okay, no. I'm gonna fight you here. I'm gonna fucking fight you here. How fucking dare you compare George?
I thought Mr. Dursley was about to like roll out and be like,
no. Okay. Is George excessive with his descriptions of fat people? Yes, absolutely. Do they feel malicious? I don't think so.
No,
I think he is lovingly speaking on the fat experience, Spicer. How dare you?
Illyrio,
my culture.
Illyrio starts singing "This Is Me." He starts singing "The Greatest Showman." Like, oh my god! But it's like, but it's also, I'm like, I'm sorry, I do have to push back a little bit, because it's like he literally talks about how he's so fat that he has to wear all of these perfumes to cover the stench from his fat body, that you could see the jiggling rolls through.
Okay, well, let me put it this way, Spicer. George is allowed to say that. because George is fat, and George can say it.
That's his word.
That's his word.
That's his. That's
Yes.
not your word. That's not your word, Spicer.
No.
That's his word. How dare you?
So you don't get to have opinions on that, okay, Spicer? Because the only other fat person here has said, you know what? No, I co-sign that. I co-sign everything he just said.
That's his word. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Dare you.
I had to point it out. I had to point it out.
Yeah.
The minute that queen saunters on, I'm like, there it is. There's our fat boy. You go.
Oh, and it only continues. It truly only continues from here. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second.
Oh, yeah.
One more thing before, because I think we're starting to wrap up Dany's first chapter a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing that I do want to point out that I need to make clear. I need to make clear to anyone who is reading the books for the first time but has only ever seen the show or whatever. I need to tell you, Daenerys Targaryen, and any Targaryen for that matter, is not immune to fire. There is a line in this first chapter where they talk about like, ooh, we're Targaryens. We should like the heat. And like they do as like a human who likes heat. They are not immune to fire. That is a weird show invention that I think wrecks the logic of later very important scenes and kind of devalues what they are. So just from this moment forward, know that she can be burned. And she will be burned at points. Okay.
I will say that was one of the things that like I did clock when reading it. I'm like, oh, this feels like that because that was very Hollywood, right?
Yes,
that invention was very Hollywood of like planting and payoff. They're like, well, why do you do that? It's like I think they just like warm. Like I think like I like a hot shower. Like. Like
yes. That doesn't make you immune to fire.
I'm actually a Targaryen bastard. You can't tell because I'm bald, but if the hair grows out, it's long and silky, baby. Like it's silver. I got purple eyes. A silver mane, riding on the dragon. Like oh my god. No, it's I did clock that in the moment. I'm like, oh, that was so Hollywood. Like that was so Hollywood, and like. I think, like, I understand why they did it in the show because it's Hollywood and because, like, the style of storytelling is a little different. But I do see what you're saying of, like, it's a little ridiculous to be like, you took one line of, like, I like hot baths, and some Hollywood producer's like, she's immune to fire. Like,
well, it's also, and again, I'm not wanting to jump ahead because again, we're all reading together, but I assume like we kind of know how the first season of the show wraps up. So we kind of know how the first book wraps up. I think they were trying to, plant, as you said, planting and payoff, but like plant the idea that at the end, there's a Targaryen reason for why things work out the way they do, and that diminishes like what's actually happening there and making it just like, oh, well, didn't you know that with this gene, you too can avoid anyway.
Yeah, well, it's because like the show is much more interested in the sort of like fantasy trope of like the chosen ones, right? The Targaryens are the chosen ones, and they're so special and they're so different. And like, I don't think that's what the book is at all. I think like the Targaryens and like the Valyrians are just lucky. Right, like they're just incredibly lucky. Like they just found some dragons, and they're like, dragons, great.
There's like a little bit more. There's a little bit more. We're not quite there yet, but I get what you're saying. Like it's not. This isn't because this is multi POV because there are lots of important people. It's not just the one special family doing special things. There's lots of pieces, but I will say that they are an important piece. Anyway, that's just my spiel before people start commenting like, yeah, Danny's not important, you motherfuckers. I'm like, no.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
Let's take a break. How about that?
Let's take a break. And on that, let's take a break.
Okay. Great. Goodbye. And we're back. So moving right along, we have Eddard I, our first Ned chapter. Yay, Ned Stark. So let's do a quick synopsis. Stop it, Spicer. How dare you? I did throw up a poll on the Spotify, and I think that whether you think he's a cop or not, I do believe that one won.
Right.
So if I can put up polls in multiple places, I will do so for any other questions we have. But whatever. Anyway, let's do a quick synopsis of Ned's first chapter. So, as we open on Ned's chapter, Robert Baratheon and the royal court are all arriving to Winterfell, where they are received by Ned and his family. Upon getting there, Robert is gruff. He looks very different than the last time Ned saw him. He's gotten a bit girthier, let's say, and then right away, we'll get there. Well, hey, this is the synopsis. You shut up. There's an order to this. But anyway, as soon as I get there, Robert's like, I want to go to the crypt because I want to see Lyanna Stark, because that's what this whole fucking series revolves around. Because Robert was supposed to marry Lyanna, but then she was kidnapped by Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince, and that set in motion the series of events that turned into Robert's rebellion, the toppling of the Targaryens, yada yada yada. So Robert wants to go pay his respects to her down in the crypt, and then while he's down there, he and Ned talk. Ned is thinking a lot about his family in the past. He remembers Lyanna's death, where he remembers her having flowers and saying, Ned promised me, and then he was found later by Howland Reed just holding her body. And then back in the present, he's talking to Robert, and Robert's like, hey, by the way, I'm here because, Jon Arryn's dead, and I need the hand of the king, because I don't do that kingship myself. The hand does that for me, and you're going to do that because you seem like, I like the cut of your jib, whatever. We've been bros since, baby bros. Cool. And so Ned is like, okay, let me think about it. And Robert's like, hey, while we're at it, I'm gonna have my son marry your daughter. Ain't that nice? And Ned's like, okay, let's think about it. And then yeah, that's the end of that chapter, isn't it? So yeah, thoughts.
Once again, we're back to the fats.
Back to the fats. I wrote down because I think it's like right near the opening. I don't remember if it's like from, I think it's like kind of, Ned-ish narrating his thoughts or whatever, but Robert, because he's gotten so fat, they use the phrase the royal jowls, and in my notes I wrote the royal jowls is nasty work. Like Georgie, that's fucked up. Georgie, I defended you not 10 minutes ago. Georgie, that's fucked up. Because that's fucking funny.
Just George reclaiming the fat narrative over here. Just George is fighting for his people. George is going out there every goddamn day fighting for the fats. Just oh my god.
But I will say, I think this is a wonderful example of like the humor in this series, because George is like funny. These books can be really, really funny, and it's not always in like the like yuckity yuck obvious ways, but like referring, like describing how fat he is and then saying, yes, the royal jowls are very present, or whatever the fuck the line was. Like, that's funny shit right there, man.
Yeah, it was very noticeable with Robert. It was very noticeable. I'm like, we get it. I know he's not the Henry VIII stand-in in this world. That's Aegon the Fourth or whatever. But like, we get it. I'm Henry VIII. I am.
Like, George, I think, like, pulls from things very often. Like, not everyone has like a one-to-one, like I should say a sole like one-to-one counterpart in English history, though there are a lot. You can figure out lots of plot points if you just know about English history. But anyway, but no, like I do think like that is part of it. Like, Robert is obviously like a king who was very, very good back in his prime, and has slowly lost a lot of that as he's given into his vices.
Yeah, I do think there was like a funny line where like Ned's like, he was always a man of appetites, and it looks like they're going to his detriment now, like something like that.
They're catching up.
And like he's like heavy breathing by the end of the staircase. I'm like, girl same.
but like the saddest part, and I'm like, this is George, this is why it's nasty. You're going down the stairs. He's breathing heavy going down the stairs, man. That's fucked up. George, that's fucked up. How dare you?
Going down those stairs, he's heavy mouth breathing. He's got the meat sweats. Like,
in my TikToks, I shit on Robert Baratheon all the time because I do not love that character. I think he's a piece of shit. But damn, this whole chapter, I was like, fuck George, this is I hate this man. Even I'm like, calm it down.
Fat, dumb.
Fat.
Well, this chapter was ghost written by Joanne. Like that's what's going on here. Like,
leave her. I don't want her in this podcast. We're not bringing that. We're not bringing that juju here. Okay, leave it alone.
Leave it in the past. Oh
yes.
my god. I will say, but putting the fat jokes aside, I will say my other favorite thing is like going on with the theme that we talked about in the other chapter is George's problems with perspective and measurement showed its face again, where it's like, okay, so you just said earlier that this castle has a 3-mile garden wood forest in the middle of it, but the gate is too small for a carriage to ride through.
Yes. Yes. Obviously. What are you talking about? Why is that a problem? I don't see a problem.
So how big are these walls, George?
They're very big. They're very big, Spicer.
But
Winterfell, very big wall.
But the gate is small. But that's the thing it's like, George, what's going on?
Well, yeah, because you don't want people to invade, Spicer. You don't build a big wall and put a giant hole in the middle of it. You make a little hole. Easier. You just
crawl. You got the Queen army crawled into the fucking castle.
This episode is turning into like 10% too much like shitting on George, and now I'm like defensive, like, no, Winterfell actually makes sense. 3-mile garden in the middle? What are you talking about? Those are everywhere. Look outside.
I just like, that was the one thing I'm like, yes, there's George's problem with perspective again. Like, cool. We all have flaws.
Well, but like, here's the thing though. Is that a problem with perspective, or is that like the correct measurement and perspective? Like, but now it's in relation to the previous.
Yeah. Like we went a little too fantastical, and now he brought us back down to earth. And so it's like, but how big is this castle, George? That's what I need to know. How big is this castle?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It contains multitudes, Spicer. Okay.
Gosh.
I
will say my only gripe, and this is one of the few times where I will say that I think the show did it a little bit better, and it's a slightly.
I think we're going to say the same thing.
Oh, is it the first line that that Baratheon says to Ned Stark?
I wasn't going to say the specific line. I think that scene is better in the show.
The scene is so much better. Better in the show. I love that scene. It's a great intro to all these characters. Mm-hmm. My favorite line in the show is when Robert Baratheon gets off his horse and he goes, "You've gotten fat."
And then Sean Bean just like does like the once up and down.
Yeah, and then they laugh. Down, and then they laugh and then they blow out, and it's great. I'm like, oh, I love that. That's so funny. Yeah. Like, I think that was funny. Like the show did it better in that instance of like it's very concise. You get to like you immediately know who Robert Baratheon is as a character. Like that he's just a bros bro. Like
yeah.
But no, that was my one. That's my one gripe thus far. Where I'm like, show did it better there. Like,
oh, totally. And I will say, for the record, because people say that all I like to do is shit on the show, but I don't. I talk about things I like from the show pretty frequently. Just pay attention. Anyway, this is a scene. Can you tell I'm defensive? But no, this is a scene that I fully think the show does better because it just fleshes it out. Yeah. Like you get like a snapshot of it, and it was funny rereading it, going like, I forgot how like quick it is because it's just very abridged. It's almost like it's being told in summary, like, oh, and then Robert showed up, and then he said that he wanted to go down. Like it's not like happening in dialogue very much. It's like being summarized, and like most of the people don't speak in the section that like recounts it before they're going down to the crypts. And so I do like the show counterpart because I feel like not only do you get like a sense of Robert, you get a sense of his and Cersei's relationship a little bit better because like she does try to argue a little bit in the show versus here like it says she like protests and then like Jaime takes her aside versus like the confrontation like being between her and Robert in the show I think was like a bit better of a setup.
I think it's also just like a thing of medium that like the show is a TV show, so like dialogue is always going to be the better option as opposed to like you know weird like talking about things. So like I think that's also what's going on here, but like I think it's just better. Like it's just like you said, it's just a better moment. It's more concise. We get to know these characters a lot better, And it's also like a great sort of like opening. Forget my musical theater term, like an opening number almost of like let's meet our crazy cast of characters, right? And everyone gets a moment. But yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's better in the show.
Yeah. And then down when we're in the crypts, boy, again, and like I keep saying this like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Like we need lore dumps. We need lore dumps this early because we gotta set all this shit up because there's lots of stuff around. But boy, do we get a lot. We get a lot in a little bit. All of like the Lyanna stuff starts getting planted now, and it's very interesting. The whole like promise me Ned thing, which is like a refrain that we'll get with Ned like a few times, is. Yeah, it opens the door to like the mysteries. I think a little heavier than he even intended, which you'll find out a little bit more later when I think he like tries to like plant some red herrings. But whatever. I'm not speculating because we don't have those books yet. I don't know what Lyanna has to do with any other characters who are possibly in Winterfell right now. Anyway, thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I will say it was very funny because, like, I don't think that was something that they talked about in the show until the last season with,
well, later seasons.
Yeah, or later. Yeah. Yeah. With Bran doing his, third eye bullshit. Yeah. And oops, Jon is actually a Targaryen bastard. Like,
yeah. That's a theory, Spicer. That's a theory. I know it's in the TV show, but it hasn't happened in the books, and so people get like up in arms. Okay, I'm just letting you know.
Okay. I once again,
you're wrong. It's Ashara Dane, Spicer. How do you not know that's Jon's mother?
Girl, I'm so I don't.
We're moving on. We're like I'm gonna get like shit in comments, and I don't want to deal with that.
I don't know. I'm just here for the ride. Okay, moving on.
I know.
Shall we take a break?
No. Like I just mean like moving on from that particular detail. Jesus, no. Yeah, and then like the other thing that I do want to mention because like people love it when he's mentioned, is in that like kind of flashback as Ned is remembering, finding his sister dying. He also remembers that the person who finds him after she passes away is Howland Reed. Howland Reed, international man of mystery, the one character who knows everything. He has seen everything, and he is hiding in a swamp, and we never get to meet him because he knows too much.
Oh. I was gonna say, is he in the show?
He is very briefly in the show, and it's pretty dumb in the show. So
I was about to say because I don't remember this. I'm like, oh.
No, you're okay. I'll explain the Howland Reed of it all because people love when people talk about Howland Reed. He's the great white whale to our Ahab. Basically, when Ned Stark goes down to like get Lyanna back from the Tower of Joy, he goes with like a posse. The posse does not make it back. The sole exception, Ned makes it back along with Howland Reed. And Howland Reed is the head of House Reed. They live in the Neck. And oh my gosh, I forgot the castle. Crap. It's fine.
I do remember watching some like lore things on this. Isn't it like no one knows where the castle is? Like they think the castle moves.
Kind of. I think it's called Greywater Watch. I think that's what it is. But it's a moving castle, basically. It's built on the bogs and like with like, I don't know, bog housing, whatever the fuck it is. Mm-hmm. It's built in a way that the castle like slowly moves. And so you struggle to find it. But basically, since the Tower of Joy, Ned Stark and Howland Reed, they left. Howland Reed went back to his castle and then never left again in like 15 years. He's just been there the whole time. And Ned thinks about him a lot. The other characters have heard stuff about him, but he's the one character that like knows every secret and hides in a swamp. So everyone's like, where's Howland Reed? If Howland Reed would just show up, everything would be better. Okay.
He's in a swamp. I mean, I'm in my swamp.
Yeah.
What are you doing in my swamp? Well done. Howland Reed is just Shrek. It's just Shrek.
He's just Shrek. It's fine. But well, let's see. Oh, some interesting things about Ned. I think we get some like really good characterization for him here that explains his point of view. The first being Ned thinking about his older brother Brandon and how his father and brother were killed by the Mad King, which was another contributing thing to the rebellion. After Lyanna was abducted, and the fact that Ned wasn't supposed to be the heir; he's the spare. So his like idolization of Brandon, like Brandon was like the true lord of whatever, and I'm just doing my best, I think is very like telling of everything that will come to happen in this book. Like Ned is trying his best. He's trying to like live up to a standard that he set for himself, and it's like there's a tragedy in that, like because he does feel like he wasn't meant to have this life, and so he needs to like make it count.
Yeah. Sorry, I blinked out there.
Okay. Jesus Christ. Do we need to talk about the fat descriptions again to get your attention back? What are we? Jeez. It's a discussion podcast, Spicer. We talk.
No,
we listen. We respond.
Someone tried to call me, and my autism brain was like, "Someone's calling me right now," and so I got distracted. I'm sorry.
Fine,
you're like bearing your soul about this very important plot point. I'm like, let's talk about the fat people again. Oh my god. For everyone listening in, this is literally our friendship. This is literally...
I say things, you pretend to listen, and then when I call you as on it and being like, you don't listen to me, you go, what? I listen? What are you talking about?
I listened. You talked about the castle.
You have it on video, Spicer. It's on video. Like
you talked about the castle. The castle moves, and and the secret man in there. He's the international man of mystery.
That was minutes ago, Spicer. Minutes ago. We moved on. We moved on from there. Jeez.
I, much like Howland Reed, went to the castle in my mind, parked it out, and didn't leave for 15 years.
Okay. Any other thoughts on Ned's first chapter?
You're beautiful, you're valued. I'm sorry, my brain freaked out. No, I think it's, I will say the one description that I kind of liked, and, this is just so random, is the part where they're talking about, like, the swords, on, like, the graves, and how there's, like, in the crypt, and how, like, the older ones have, like, rusted away to, like, nothingness, and there's just, like, a stain. I think it's just, like, a really nice way to be like, it's old here. It's so old that the swords have literally rusted away into nothing. Like,
and that's what makes that's what makes the crypts in Winterfell so mysterious. Because is there stuff hiding down there? Because this is very old, Spicer. It's very old. What are you gonna find if you dig around a little bit? People have thoughts. There's like 1,000 theories. Like, I don't like ice dragons is one of them. That's fun. Maybe there's an ice dragon. Who knows? It's ice, they're a thing. Ice dragons.
Of course, ice dragons. Well, I mean, famously in the last season, we didn't meet one.
Don't bring that shit here. Don't you come into my house.
You come into my house. You talk about Joanne rolling. You talk about zombie ice dragons.
You bring up how they hurt my girl Viserion like that in the goddamn TV show. Fuck that. How dare you? Sit down, both physically and metaphorically. Like, down. How dare you? Okay, we're gonna take a break now. Okay, see you in a second. Okay. And we're back, and we are moving on to our final chapter of the episode, and that is Jon I, our first Jon Snow chapter. Yay!
She is my queen.
No, leave that shit. I told you, leave it at the door. Leave it away. Bad juju.
Get out, scat.
Yes. Okay, but let's do a quick recap of this chapter. So in this chapter, we are at the feast being held at Winterfell for Robert Baratheon and the royal family. Jon Snow is having a time. Jon Snow is 14. He's a teenage boy feeling his feelings. And because he is a bastard, he doesn't get to sit at the big kids table. Well, literally the kids table at the front, because that would be an insult. So he gets to sit with the rabble, but that's okay, because the rabble, the poors, they get to drink as much as they want. They get to party. They get to have their dogs there. And so he's having a grand old time, but he's getting a little too tipsy. His uncle Benjen shows up, and then he gets a little pissy because Benjen's like, "Hey, you'd be good at the Night's Watch." And John's like, "Yeah, I'm an adult now, so I should just go." And Benjen's like, "Well, no, that's not what I was saying. That meant like in a couple years." And John's like, "But, man, I'm a real boy, man." And and Benjen's like, "Okay, sorry." And so Jon gets a little angry. Because Benjen's like, "Hey, you're not going to be able to like get married, have kids." And Jon's like, "I don't care." And then Benjen's like, "You might care after you've had a few bastards." And Jon's like, "I'll never have a bastard." He gets really, really angry about it. And then realizes he's shouting and then he's crying because he has lots of teenage boy feels, which I get, been there. And then he goes outside where he meets Tyrion, who shows up, does a backflip. We'll talk about it in a second. And
Tyrion secret acrobatic. Like,
I can't. I love this chapter, actually. I love this chapter. But he talks to Tyrion a little bit. Tyrion gives him a Tyrion pep talk. And then they go back into the party. End of scene. There we go. So there's a lot to unpack in this chapter.
There is so much happened in this chapter. This is the one I have the most thoughts on.
Yep.
I will start by the first note I wrote was, "We love our populist babe, the people's princess," with Jon Snow.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my god,
the people's princess.
Oh my god, I'm just picturing like Kit Harington, the Jon Snow actor, but with like the Diana wig.
But with the and he's like
yeah.
looking with the eyes.
Uh-huh.
Like,
yes. Correct. Good.
Well, there were 3 people in this marriage. There were 3 people in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
It's a terrible Diana impression.
I was doing Jon Snow.
Oh, you're doing Jon Snow. Okay, I get it. It's better. It's better.
Yeah. It's okay. Jon Snow in drag doing that interview.
There were layers to the joke.
There were layers. Yeah. But yeah, we love a people's princess. We love, which I also love. It's so funny because it's like it sets up him being like, I don't care about being a bastard. Being a bastard is actually great because I get to sit with all the poors, and I get to sit here, and I get to have my dog, even though like I don't get to have a family, and like it's great. Like, woo! Talking about this is the best. Like, it's very the lady doth protest too much. Like,
yeah.
Like, girl, it's fine to have some feelings. Like,
yeah. Going along with it, Jon's progression over the chapter is like exactly what you're saying. Like, starting off, like, we're making the best of the situation. Like, I don't really care. I'm gonna drink all that I can because I'm allowed to down here. Yippee! And then like the longer he's drinking, he's realizing the feelings that he was like shoving down, and that's really funny. And like, boy, do we get a reminder. Like, Jon Snow is a teenage boy. He's a teenage boy. And I will plant my flag on the hill that I think that this is one case with Jon specifically where like the aging up of the character in the TV show makes it read just a little weird because like in the show, like that's an adult, at the very, that's like at least a 17 or an 18-year-old. So when he's acting like that, I'm like, can you like get over yourself? But here I'm like, oh, he's 14. Yeah. He is 14. He's fully hormonal. Like,
in the TV show,
sorry.
It's like, in the TV show, it's like, babe, don't you have a mortgage to pay? Like, why are you? Why are you?
You have a beard. You can grow a beard.
You can grow a beard. Why are you upset about this? I need you to self-actualize Jon Snow. But here it's like, no, he's a 14-year-old boy who's having a hissy fit. Who got too drunk, who got too turned. Yeah. Which, like, I also love the description of, like, every time he took a drink, like, everyone would be like, yeah!
Like, yeah.
Like,
because, like, this is their chance.
Yeah, like the crowd's like, woo, woo, woo.
Yeah. No,
Doing
it's
keg
very,
stands,
it's very.
doing keg stands with the squires.
The keg stands. But yes, no, it's great, and I do think also like because he's loosening up the more he drinks, we're getting like insight into his thought process, which I will say, because people like to shit on a lot of characters, but again, I think the point is that these are all characters that like grow, and they're all going to start somewhere. When they do, they're growing, and Jon doesn't start in the most likable way. Jon is kind of a dick. Again, a teenage boy, so like I get it in context, but like the way he's like making fun of Marcella, the princess, where he's like, "Oh, she looks really stupid. Rob doesn't notice how stupid she looks." I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude, this is a lot, and just like his. It's very like interesting, like seeing like him kind of like almost at his most unlikable, and not that we like don't get how one gets there, but like no, there are unlikable qualities going on at the moment.
My favorite is that just I think shows how he's a 14-year-old boy is when like Tyrion's like, "Can I pet your dog?" And he's like, "I don't know, he might rip your throat out," and like like he wouldn't do, the dog wouldn't do that, but
it's so 13-year-old like edgelord, like yeah, no, it's really dark and scary over here, like I don't know if you can handle it. It's so much.
And Tyrion's like, "You little shit, I just want to pet your dog." Like, hey, watch while I do a backflip. Like, watch while I do a backflip, kid.
Oh, and then like keeping up with like his like his mean internal monologue, him like remembering when the Baratheons and the Lannisters get there is so funny. When he's like looking at Robert and like, "That's not a king, that's just a red-faced fat man, so fat. How is he a king, man? How is it? I don't get it." And then like
and then the change
when Jamie walks by,
"That's a king."
It's like, "That's a man right there. You don't understand. That's a real man."
I feel like Jon Snow is like one red pill podcast away from just being a full incel. Like,
no,
at least right now, in this context. Like maybe later. Like I know later it grows.
See. In my head, I'm not reading it that way, because like my fun headcanon, which some people don't love, but I think is funny, is that Jon is a confused bisexual teenager. He is confused, and so he's angry. He's angry because he's confused. And that's why when he sees Robert, he's like, "That's not what a man is." Then he sees Jamie, he's like, "Wow, look at how handsome he is. He's so strong."
I'd bend the knee for him. If you know what I mean.
No.
I mean, we just made fun of George R. Martin for saying gross things about a 13-year-old, and here I am saying gross things about characters. So apologies, George. Like,
yeah, no.
But
Sorry,
no, I see what you're saying of like how it's like it's trauma. This child is trauma. But yeah, no, it's wow, he is an angry 14-year-old boy with so many feelings.
And
I'm sorry, go on. No, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, one more thing, just specifically on that point, before we move on. I love when he's like talking to Benjen, and he's like, well, my hero is King Daeron Targaryen, because he's the best, because he led an army when he was my age, he did all this. And Benjen's like, yeah, and then he died when he was 18. Did you forget that part? Because the teenage boy who wanted to do war died in war? Weird. Is that really what you're using as the justification for why you're old enough to do this? The kid who died at 18?
And also killed like 40,000 or 50,000 people.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Girl.
Yeah.
Moving on to the other topic, but related. Wow, is Tyrion different?
Yep.
The power of Peter Dinklage's charm, like the way that man is just so charming, and they were just like, well, we can't write the role the same way because we can't have Peter Dinklage like doing weird backflips and
okay, let's talk about the backflips real quick. Okay, George has since come out and said he doesn't regret very many choices he's made in his writing for this series, but one that he does is the fact that randomly, and it's just in this book, Spicer. It is only in this book.
Oh, I thought we were trying to set up the fact that Tyrion is secretly like really like nimble or something. Like
no, because he's not. Because here's the thing: he's not even later in this book. He has issues because of like his dwarfism, like causing like physical challenges when he has to like ride a horse or whatever, or he has to like climb stairs.
They talk about it earlier in the chapter when like
yes,
he has trouble keeping up with everyone else. Like
yes. But no, he can do backflips and acrobatics, and like his entering Tyrion Lannister entering the scene by doing a backflip onto the ground from like 2 stories up is unhinged. I love it, but it's crazy. It's crazy. And George quickly abandons it and says like, "Hey, I wasn't aware of the full like scope of what that disability does and like the effect it can have. I, in my head, thought that was a fun thing, and I apologize." And it's so funny.
Tyrion is just secretly Spider-Man. Like,
yeah, he's just yes.
He's just, like, that's who we need to have play the next Spider-Man. It's Peter Dinklage as Tyrion Lannister in the spider suit.
No, I agree, absolutely. But yes, that whole scene is very interesting because I still like it, but Tyrion does feel different. Like he doesn't. I do still think he has like a wit to him, but like the charm isn't quite the same. So it's like a different flavor of wit, which is very interesting. It's a lot more. It's less fully likable here.
I think. Well, and it's funny because like. Peter Dinklage has literally played this role now, but like it's very Cyrano de Bergerac in the TV show. Like it's very like, I'm actually quite charming and handsome, and like I'm very like astute and witty and sort of in tune with everything. But like I just happen to be a little person. I happen to have a dwarf.
Yes.
Whereas like in the book, he's a lot more kind of jaded. Like already, like Tyrion becomes jaded in the TV show, but like, and then suddenly develops a 21st century view on war. But neither here nor there. But like, in like the book, it's very clear. Like he starts in a very jaded place, and he's like, like fuck the world. The world does not care about me. I truly so like. And like I do love that like we still kind of get the same like the conversation he gets with Jon in the books, which is the like fuck the haters monologue. Like like and I think I do kind of like it. I actually kind of like it a little more like in the books because he's so jaded. He's like, "Hey kid, you want to know my secret? Fuck everyone."
Yes. Yeah. No, I fully agree with this, which very smoothly transitions us into our first question from the audience, which remember, you can add those under the YouTube, under the Spotify, whatever. I don't think Apple Podcasts lets you add questions, but whatever. I read them. So this is the one that we got where it was less a question, more just a request to talk about this conversation between Jon and Tyrion, especially the don't forget who you are line. Oh, sorry, I should say this comes from Emma Toben 6436. So thank you, Emma. And she also said, I also feel like it speaks to Tyrion's character and what he had to go through growing up. And I fully agree. I like, as you're saying here, I like him starting like just fully jaded kind of from the get-go, because it gives him somewhere to grow from, like Tyrion as a character, and then somewhere to fall from, which I think is really interesting. It also just makes the most logical sense. And because he's like jaded, but has he has an awareness and has come to terms with like elements of this, it makes him like a great person to give Jon advice, because Jon is still in the like he's aware, but he hasn't like come to that point of acceptance yet in the way that like Tyrion has. Even though he is jaded about it, but like Tyrion knows the way the world works, and he can tell Jon like stop. Like start using this as like a shield, like use it to your advantage, because there's nothing that's going to change it no matter how much you want it to.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting considering sort of what happens at the beginning of the chapter, right? That we start from this place of where John's like, I actually don't mind being a bastard, and then by the end he's like crying about being a bastard, and then he's like on the walls like moping with his dog, and then Tyrion knows, like, hey kids, like,
I've been there.
I've been that kid. I'm still here. But I think he starts singing Sondheim like on the walls.
Yeah.
But I think like it is interesting also sort of seeing this person who is like disabled, right?
Mhm.
Who is like who has been handed which also is so interesting that like John's like bastards are worse off or whatever because like I love the line where like Tyrion says like all dwarves are bastards in the eyes of their parents, in the eyes of the world, like we don't matter shit, like, right? And I think it's such an interesting like conversation about sort of like it's a conversation I feel that happens a lot on the internet now that is much less nuanced, which is the I suffer more. And what's so nice about this particular conversation is like Tyrion's actually coming at it from a place of compassion, right? He is not trying to like shame Jon and be like, you little shit, you're so fucking privileged. He's like, hey, I get it. The world is shitty. Like, and like Jon is being like a dumb 14-year-old boy. He's like, you don't understand. Like, nobody understands me. And Tyrion, just forever. They're gonna be like mixed up in my heads. I'm sorry, but like Tyrion's like, hey man, like I literally am disabled. Like even though I can do backflips from 2 stories off of the ground.
We ignore that part.
I'm literally disabled. Like I get it. Like, I know what it is for your parents to literally hate you. Like, I know what it is for the world to, like, constantly, like, undercut you. And you just can't let the haters win, right? It's, and I think that's, like, such a kind of nice, I love that that's where the way that the chapter ends is, like, it's an excellent way to introduce this character. Where, like, especially, like, the fact that, like, everyone's constantly, like, because the other 2 chapters, like, both Ned and Jon
Daenerys.
constantly, or no, Jon. Like,
oh, sorry.
Whenever they're talking about like Tyrion, they always refer to him as the Imp, right? Like they constantly, like everyone, like they've never even met this man. Like they've never even talked. And like whenever they describe him like, oh, he's like struggling to keep up because of his little legs, and oh, he just looks so weird because he's got 2 different eyes, and like, he's so, and like they describe him and say like his face is so smushed, and right, and like they describe him like a monster. And yet he comes up and has like the realest conversation ever, right? And it's also such a nice contrast to like Ben's conversation with Jon, where like he's just like, you little shit, like you think you're hot shit, like fuck off, like you literally think you're like a king who also died at the age of 18, like fuck you, like and like then like Jon embarrasses himself, like, and then Tyrion, this total stranger, comes up and is like, I get it, kid, and you can't don't ever let him see you cry, right? Like, you gotta stay strong, and you gotta use it to your advantage. And it's such a nice different contrast too of like, I don't know, like it's a beautiful I hate using this word, but dichotomy, right? of like, like this family member who thinks that they're trying to be helpful to Jon and actually is not being helpful in the moment. And then like this total stranger who like clocks Jon immediately and is like, this kid's going through it. Let me give him a good piece of advice. And then the fact that, and then like, I love the final line that like, you know, which might be a little problematic in the disabled community conversation, but the final line of like, he stood as tall as a king. Like, like I do think that's such a, like, because Jon comes full circle of where like originally he was describing him as like, oh, this like short imp and he's like a monster, and then at the end he's like, oh no, especially considering that earlier in the chapter he literally was like, Robert doesn't look like a king, he's fat, and then this person that he described as monstrous but like gives him the realest talk ever, he's like, oh no, that's a king, right? So like,
no, and it's, oh, sorry.
No, go on. No, that's it. That was it.
Oh, I was just gonna say this whole thing is in my opinion like a fascinating examination of almost like intersectionality, because both of these characters come from immense privilege, but then have something that disadvantages them in some way, and so the tension that's created by like my disability or my social class status, whatever, with like the privilege of the upbringing and all of the stuff that comes with that is very interesting. And so with Tyrion, you like have someone who's like basically come to terms with that and even like acknowledges like, yes, I'm a dwarf, and that comes with like a lot of these issues, but I also recognize that I'm a Lannister of Casterly Rock, and that gives me a completely different experience. And so like I have to like, I don't know, like pick and choose like how I'm complaining. And that's kind of like the lesson that he's teaching Jon here is like, hey, you are angry because the world kind of dehumanizes you as a bastard. And me with my dwarfism, which we see in how everyone describes him, like the same thing is happening. Tyrion is constantly being dehumanized in the eyes of everyone else. And so you need to be aware that like, yes, that is something that people are going to do, but you are also in a place of privilege. You have a spot that is higher than basically any other bastard around here. Okay. And I think it really sets up Jon's arc for this first book because it's really simply just like him coming to terms with the fact that like, yes, he has this social disadvantage in how people are going to see him and dehumanize him, but he also has a lot more than some other people, especially from lower social classes, have had, and like understanding, you know, when you can be frustrated and when you need to like recognize like, okay, like my situation isn't good and like maybe I can use my privilege in a better way.
Well, it's also fascinating. Like that's just kind of what the books are doing constantly. Like it's
Yeah.
constantly talking about intersectionality and like
Yeah.
I think like nowadays we think it's like a zero-sum game of like you are either an oppressed class or you are a privileged class. And it's like no, they're like
No.
it's little slices of everything, and that's what's so like fascinating about the books and the TV show. Like, because I mean, like in the TV show, you see constantly like the common folk like you know, assaulting or making fun of Tyrion, right, and dehumanizing him, and they're like, well, you don't understand because I'm poor, right, and it's like. Yeah, but you're not disabled, like, right? Yeah. Like, and it's like George is like constantly like pushing this question forward of like, you know, how are you disadvantaged in the world, and then how are you like using that or not using that? Because it's like you see this with female characters, you see this with queer characters, you see this with like characters who are from a different racial background. Like they're constantly sort of like figuring out how to function or not function within the system that they are like a part of. And there's the characters who are like angry at the world and like shaking their fist and being like rah 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 rah, why me? And then there's the characters who are like Tyrion, who are like very savvy and like, okay, how do I work this? It's also interesting because I think in the TV show, where another thing I'm seeing is like Tyrion's a lot more charming in the TV show, but he's also a lot, and he's a lot more jaded in the books. But Tyrion also is a lot more self-destructive in the TV show. What's interesting, like. He engages.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there, friend.
Okay. So, like thus far, I'm like, oh, where's? I mean, like, there's that first scene we see in the TV show with Tyrion where like there's titties everywhere. Like...
Yeah, no, I will say just like to prepare you, like he has a lot of awareness in this chapter that he doesn't always apply to himself down the road. So yeah.
The titties are coming. The titties are coming. Is what I'm hearing.
They are coming.
Break out the girls. Let's go, girls.
Well, one thing I want to mention before we move on to like our wrapping up sections is I really like the way it just kind of happened to work out where we got the Daenerys chapter and the Jon chapter back to back because they are such a interesting like pair that like are like mirror like inverses of each other.
Yeah.
Because Jon is like technically as a bastard, he is like from a lower social class, but is being raised in the privileged area. And then on the other side of the world, you have Daenerys, who is from the high social class and is being raised in like the underprivileged place. And like how that affects like how they've been socialized, where Jon is going in with this confidence that like kind of has to be tempered a little bit. And just like to remember, like, you know, I don't know, like not to abuse like the privilege you've grown up with because you were also disadvantaged in a different way. And then Daenerys is like the inverse of that. She's so quiet and is needing to like build that confidence so that she can, you know, escape the situation.
It's almost as if it's a song of ice. and fire. I will say one thing I did. This is sort of my like larger thought and sort of like my thesis that I have um thus far, and it has to do with sort of like the way that like George uses perspectives, and it has to do with like the medium. Because if I feel like I've said this a billion times now, like we are nothing but Lindsay Ellis stands here, and like she talks about this all the time of where like the medium is the message, right? It's that old adage of like how it's not just the story you're telling, it's like how you're telling the story and like in what way are you telling the story. And I just think it's so fascinating that like George R. R. Martin is like talking about all these things like in a fantasy novel, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, like to go on a tangent, go with me here. From my experience, like in the opera world, like I'm not a big fan of Puccini. I only really like Gianni Schicchi and like Tosca, but like the big opera that everyone loves is La Boheme, and like it was like a revolutionary piece. It's what Rent is based off of, and it like is based off of that's like about poor people dying in Paris. Like that's the plot. And it was so revolutionary for so many reasons, but like the biggest reason is like it was an opera, which was like originally this like art form of the nobles and kings, and it was about like gods and emperors and stuff, and he's like talking about poor people, right? And like that was so revolutionary because it's like, oh wow, he's like applying this really dramatic art form to like regular day people, and like saying like they have dramatic lives too, like the things that happen to them are just as important as what happens to like kings and gods and whatnot. And like and sort of like reinvigorated opera, and like opera became more interested in like not just, you know, myths and stuff. And I think like a similar thing is going on here because like George, the fact that he is like telling this story like in a fantasy book where like the whole point, or most not the whole point, most fantasy I feel like tends to be this very black and white world, right? Good versus evil, you know, the good shall triumph over the baddies, and like, you know, the baddies are our stand-in for like Satan and stuff, and the goodies are like, you know, stand-in for like Jesus or whatever, right? Like it's always very like one-sided and very like dualistic. And George is telling like a very nuanced story, and like I think like the fact that he's using POVs in a fantasy novel is like, and he's switching POVs constantly, like is fascinating because it's like he is showing us even the characters that we think are little shits, like he is showing us no, there's a reason they think this way, right? Like it's never black and white. Like we always are getting like, and that's why he's using these perspectives. It's because like he's trying to like make us understand like people don't turn into monsters. Like they always have their reasonings, and like they're never going to see themselves as a monster. Like they're always like it's more gray than it is like black and white, and like that's what's so fascinating to me. I think even going into like what we're talking about like with intersectionality, like it's so fascinating to like get these characters' perspectives, because like usually in fantasy it's told from like one point of view, or it's like sort of like an omnipotent like narrator, right? And it's very much dictated like these are the baddies, these are the goodies, and cheer for the goodies and boo for the baddies. Whereas like we're constantly getting like different perspectives in this fantasy novel, and I think that's what's so interesting to me thus far is like it's something that's lost a little bit in the TV show, where like you don't get that. It's the medium of like that you're getting it as a POV from this character, so you're getting their constant stream of thought, you're getting the things from their perspective. So like, you know, because you can look at like, you know, because I'm sure we're gonna get a Cersei chapter soon, or maybe we're not, whatever. But like
a few bucks.
oh really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Ugh, sorry, girl.
Yeah.
But like I think it's just so fascinating that like these characters that like in the TV show you're like, that's a bitch, right? And then it's like you'll get their perspective and be like, oh, okay, they were traumatized as a child. Okay, cool. Like, right. And so anyways, but like I just wanted to like point that out. Like I think that's like the medium that George is using and like how he is like tackling the medium is fascinating, and I think is like worthy of note in talking about this book.
Oh, completely. I fully agree with everything you have just said. I think that it is a lot harder, at least if you're paying attention, to like hate any, like fully, completely like hate and discredit any of the POV characters, because like you just understand them on a more intimate level than you do in the TV show. Like being in someone's head, even if I don't like what they're doing, like you said, I get it. I get how like you got from 2 + 2 = 4 or whatever. Yeah. So it's really cool to, it's a great way of adding nuance to all of these decisions and plot points and how they affect different people, and just like like the nuances of like the same event can have very different effects on a range of people. Like we keep hearing about Robert's Rebellion in the context of every one of these characters, and they all have very distinct feelings about it, and it's fascinating to see how like this one event can be viewed 20 different ways.
Yeah, no, it's literally, and like I think it's such an interesting like sociological perspective on people, like, and like that's what's so fast. And like once again, something that I think was lost a little bit in the TV shows, because I think the TV show tries to like play into that normal fantasy trope more of like good versus evil, and these are the goodies and these are the baddies, right? Yeah. Lannisters are bad, and it's like, well, like from that perspective, like, I mean, they're monsters for sure, but like, it's good. I don't know. And I think this is definitely, I think, a story that like, I think people should pay attention to more nowadays. And perhaps understand people on a more human level, because like, once again, like that final chapter in that conversation with Tyrion, where like we've constantly been dehumanizing him because we just make a bunch of assumptions about him, and then like he opens his mouth and you're like, oh, he's all right. Like, yeah, great. But yeah, no, that was like my big thought on my big thesis sort of on the chapters thus far. But yeah,
great. And I'm glad you're getting that from them, because that's also what I got from them. So we are on the same wavelength, and as we go deeper and deeper, which speaking of, as we wrap up, I want to let everyone know for next week, if you are reading along, which remember you don't have to, but if you want to, the 3 chapters are going to be Catelyn II, Arya I, and Bran II. So very, very Stark heavy next week, which will be great. And also, before we go, I love how last week I said I'm going to enforce the asking our favorite death every.
No one dies. Well, no, it was that chicken, maybe. That
okay. I was going to say, there's a couple of sneaky ones if you pay attention. So the chicken is yours, obviously.
She ate that chicken.
She ate.
Go for that chicken. She ate.
I will say technically we hear about Lyanna dying, though I don't know if I would ever want to categorize that as a favorite.
That's a choice.
But I will say like the death of Jon Snow's sobriety.
The death of Jon Snow. Well, he's a man now. He's ready. He's ready to invade Dorne. Yeah. He's ready. He's ready to go and kill all of the wildlings. He's ready to go. Like,
he's so ready to go. But okay. Where can everyone find you, Spicer?
You can find me on Instagram.com. Just at SpicerCar. Honestly, the best way, if you want to keep in touch with like what I'm doing, my website is honestly the best way. It's just SpicerCarComposer.com. I got some sheet music for sale there. If you want to listen, all my music is available there. If you're a theater company or an opera company that wants to do one of my shows, check it out.
Check it out. They're good. Okay, and then you can find me on TikTok, on Blue Sky at Rhani Alum, RHANIALAM. You can also on YouTube, same handle. Please go follow the YouTube if you haven't already. That's where we're going to post a lot of these. The podcast is going to be posted, the video on YouTube, and then audio links at Apple Podcast and Spotify. And yeah, well, I hope you all have a great week, and I don't know, get reading. Woo!
Get read. Read the dolls.
Read the dolls. Okay. Goodbye, y'all.
Bye.